So we'll get started. So agenda today, so we're talking about kind of the right team for success, the types of roles that will be required, mapping your needs, defining roles and bridging gaps, so bridging skills gaps in terms of delivery against kind of your retrofit goals, managing the team, so keeping alignment, making sure everyone knows what they're doing and when they should be doing it, and then looking at potentially useful tools to help you along that way, and other potential resources that you can start to look at following delivery of this presentation. So we'll get straight in. So the right team for success. So key areas when you're looking at teams, and particularly looking at teams that you wanting to deliver retrofit projects, is asking yourself some initial questions. So will my team be up for the job? First question you need to ask yourself. So assessing your current team capabilities. So you want to evaluate current skills, performance levels of your current team members. Setting clear expectations, so define the roles and responsibilities clearly to ensure everyone knows what's expected, what they're supposed to be doing. And then continuous monitoring, so regularly review team performance, provide feedback, again, so people can understand whether they need to improve anywhere or actually they're delivering fantastically. So do I have all the right skills I'm going to need? So first thing you can look at is a skills inventory. So create a comprehensive list of all the people currently within your team and list of skills required for upcoming projects. Then you can do a gap analysis. So compare current skills of your team with the required skills. So to identify those gaps. So where are we either potentially light in understanding or actually just having bodies on the ground? And also future skills requirements. So maybe this year you're doing a lot of cavity and loft insulation, but next year in your warm homes or SHF program, it's all about air source heat pumps, in which case in year one you need more skills and experience focusing on fabric works, and actually into year two it's all about kind of renewable technologies, and therefore potentially there's a skills gap there, but it's for the future. How will I fill the gaps? So are you going to do upskilling, so training programs of your current team? So actually you've got the right number of people, but there's just a few areas where we're potentially low on skills. That might be PAS 2035. It might be specific technology hiring. So we're going to recruit new team members with the necessary skills. Mentoring and coaching. So use the experienced team members to mentor others. So it might not be a case of you don't have the right skills, you just don't have the right number of people with those skills, in which case you can utilize those people who are already kind of experienced in delivering retrofit or delivering against certain elements of retrofit to upskill the rest of your team. And not kind of there would also be kind of outsourcing particular skills. Maybe it's only required for a short period of time, or it's particularly specialist area where it actually is better to outsource. How will I fill the gaps? So training programs, as we talk about hiring, mentoring, coaching, and will they work well together? So talking about that team dynamics, how you're going to build team building activities, particularly if you've gone through kind of a large area of recruitment or bringing teams together from different areas or aspects of the business. How are you going to build that kind of the team dynamic together? And the communication channels, so how are they going to be able to regularly check in? How are you going to be able to understand the feedback from the bottom and also feed down any changes, any requirements from the top as well? And what can I do to head off problems? So problem solving, regular check-ins, feedback sessions, again, making sure that those problems aren't sat kind of undiscovered by the people delivering maybe on the ground, and you don't know about them because there isn't that straight channel of communication. People don't know how they're supposed to be feeding back. So there's some of the key questions you need to be asking yourself when you're looking at skills, looking at resourcing. Onto resource planning then. So what is resource planning? Well, in short, it's resource planning is the process of efficiently allocating and managing an organization's resources to achieve its goals. The main objectives of resource planning are to ensure that resources are used effectively, align with strategic objectives, and are available when needed. So number of areas to consider when looking at resource planning. So people, right skills, right roles, right time. As I said before, you might have a need for specifically air source heat pump skills, let's say, but you're not delivering it in years' time. There's not necessarily much point in recruiting now and having someone sat around with a skill set that's not necessarily hugely needed. So making sure you understand the skills you're going to need, but also when you're going to need them and how long it takes to get them. If you're delivering tomorrow and you have a big gap in who's going to be doing handovers and project management, let's say, it's going to take you a while if you don't already have those skills and how to either upskill or hire. So when are you going to need them, and thinking, a good few months before that in terms of how you're going to get those roles in place in time. Process, so efficient workflows and methodologies. It takes a bit of time to set the processes up at the front of a project, but actually it'll help you kind of manage that going forward much more simply. So a little bit of time up front will save you a lot of time later down the line. Technology, so tools and systems that enable success, and we're going to talk about some of those tools later on in this presentation. And then budget. We all have financial resources and kind of budget cost limitations. So how do the skills gaps work around budget allocation? Does that need to be escalated if actually you've identified serious skills gaps that are missing and you don't have the budget to be able to either outsource or train or kind of hire in? That would be an issue in terms of raising a flag for delivery of a project. And that then, at least you've then got the background information to make the case that actually I need X amount of resource in order to deliver this effectively. And let's say doing a local grant or social housing fund, I've got this 15% A&A I can utilize as well to help deliver that. Navigating specific rules in resource planning. So there's a number of different rules you're going to come across, and you're going to have to make sure you're abiding by them. So you'll have specific competition rules. So for instance, with local grant or social housing fund, they've got their own rules that you'll be made aware of via the guidance or via your MOU or grant funding application. So making sure you're abiding by those. You've also got specific, if I can say the word, specific subsidy rules. Again, that would have been made clear within your GFA or MOUs. Ensure that subsidies are used appropriately and effectively to support organisational goals. And then procurement rules, again, particularly if you're working in public sector, etc., certain procurement rules that you will need to meet. So again, ensuring transparency, fairness, cost effectiveness in procurement, and how you're going about doing that. So again, making sure that you really understand the specific rules of the project you're delivering and under the funding rules and kind of wider compliance areas. Delivered at speed. So I'm sure you're aware we're pretty much into delivery now, or we will be very shortly into delivery against both local grant and the social housing fund. So everyone will be moving at speed now to upskill their teams and hopefully be on the ground sooner rather than later, delivering retrofit works on properties. So delivering resource planning and upskilling teams at speed. We got the process. So what can we automate? Utilize project management tools, resource planning tools to automate repetitive tasks. Every single project does have repetitive tasks, and if you can automate those and make them quicker, you will be saving time. Standardized procedures, so develop standardized procedures for resource allocation, skills assessment to reduce time spent on planning. So again, that little bit of time spent up front in developing some of them resources, you can then, for this project and future projects, you might be able to just say, right, we are delivering 100 homes, is these technologies, and we're going to need X, Y, and Z people in order to deliver it. And that's your kind of skills analysis up front, done straight away, and you don't have to kind of repeat some processes over and over again. Upskilling, so you've got kind of agile methodology, so can implement agile methodologies to adapt quickly to changes and new requirements. And there's always, particularly in retrofit, there's always something that comes up, some slight change in what's required. I mean, I guess something most recently would be things like SAP 10 introduction, so understanding what that impact will be, making sure again you've got the understanding of it, or you have a retrofit assessment team or contractor who's fully up to speed and can make sure that they help you along that process. And again, those type of things will always come along, particularly in this area. Iterative planning, so use iterative planning cycles to continuously refine, improve resource allocation and upskilling strategies. So there'll always be things you've got wrong, and actually if you can have some sort of lessons learned log that you can input into that process, then again, it'll make things quicker the next time around. So it's all about spending a little bit of time up front to then kind of reap the rewards later down the line. Rapid upskilling. So focus training potentially. So provide short, intensive training sessions to quickly address skills gaps. Those might be available to kind of hire in, or particularly if you've got that understanding in-house. Let's say you have a surveyor who's particularly experienced in living retrofit, and you got some other surveyors who are going to be working in terms of handovers or contractor management, but they're less skilled. Actually spending a couple of hours allowing that experienced surveyor to provide some upskilling training to quickly address potential skills gap, things that they should be identifying on site. They'll have that base knowledge, but actually that add-on can be really, really useful. And on the job learning, which I think is generally the best type of learning. So encourage learning through practical hands-on experience to speed up skills acquisition. And again, sometimes that kind of mentoring and hand-holding from a more experienced colleague can help kind of speed that process up. And then last but not least is effective communication. So clear instructions, ensure that all team members have clear, concise instructions to minimize misunderstandings and delays. So it's easy sometimes to assume someone knows how to do something just because you do. That's not always the case. So actually making sure that everyone has that clear instruction, and ideally that's kind of through something that we can refer back to, or the person who's doing it can refer back to. So that may be some sort of operations manual supported maybe by a Teams channel or something like that. So actually everyone's got that really effective communication and knows where to go to kind of learn up on something that they're just not sure about. Actually, what was my job role again? It's here. It's easy to see, etc. And then regular updates. So maintain regular communication to keep everyone informed of progress and changes. So as potentially a team leader, are you setting up those regular touch points individually, but also as a team that's come together, discuss issues? There'll always be issues. We are delivering kind of projects on domestic properties, and how you can kind of move forward quickly and effectively. Mapping your needs. So this, you've probably seen things similar to this in the past. So this is kind of the roles and responsibilities of PAS 2030, PAS 2035. So at the top, that kind of top box there, you got preparation. So things like data management, who's looking after the data side of things. See, depending whether you're on local grant or social housing fund, that level of data you'll have will differ. Who has an understanding of PAS 2035? Do you have a kind of retrofit coordinator in-house, or do you have someone who's kind of been through it and at least understands, has read PAS 2035 and knows what they're talking about? Or are you kind of exporting, outsourcing that role somewhere else? Monitoring and evaluation strategy, have you thought about that up front? It's always easy to think about monitoring and evaluation as the kind of post retrofit, but if you don't think about it first, you're not going to get the most out of it. PAS 2035 kind of incorporates your assessment. So that's your retrofit assessor. And then you've got your retrofit coordinator who kind of coordinates the whole aspect of PAS, but you've also got kind of increased roles now for the design side. So retrofit design, retrofit advice. It's always a funny one. The retrofit advisor role within PAS 2035, there isn't a particular training course there. So yeah, if you are looking to go down the role of having a retrofit advisor, understanding the types of qualifications or experience you're going to want from that, because there isn't necessarily an official retrofit advisor training course that you can just say, yes, you have that or not. PAS 2030, that's the installer qualification. So does your installer have the qualifications to install the measures that you're looking to do? PAS 2030, they're accredited on individual measures. So again, you can't assume just because they've got PAS 2030 for Windows that they can install external wall insulation, let's say. And then on to post retrofit. So again, monitoring, evaluation, and that advice piece, but also maintenance as well. Again, often forgotten, especially if you're looking at things, well, any retrofit measure really, but things like air source heat pumps, who's going to be maintaining those following installation, following maybe a 12-month defect period, who is picking up where you're getting problems with those systems, again, bringing in those wider stakeholders. Defining roles and bridging gaps now. So again, we've covered this slightly, but in terms of the roles and tasks, what jobs need doing on the project. So it's not just about the skills; it's also about the individual roles within any one project. So we're going to define the roles. We're going to map the people we have available against those roles, identify gaps in coverage, so tasks with no one to cover them. This is a kind of really important part in that often things will fall through the gaps where you don't have this process set in place. And sometimes even if you do, there'll be areas that you just didn't think about necessarily. But through formalizing that kind of defining roles process, you should hopefully minimize that. I thought this person was doing it, I thought they were doing it, and therefore something didn't get done because it fell through that gap, because not everyone was fully clear on their roles. So once you know the gaps, how will you bridge the gaps? So again, we've talked about, are you going to train, are you going to recruit, or are you going to outsource? And then, as I said, the rest is easy, but obviously you're into delivering a project then with a fully skilled up team. So hopefully there should be much less to go wrong. Again, these are not documents that you just kind of leave on a shelf necessarily. You should always be updating. There'll always be areas that you didn't really fully consider at the start of a project. You can always add those in, make sure those gaps are filled. Defining roles and sources of information. So there's multiple areas you'll be able to get information from when you're defining roles. So internal reports. Review internal reports such as project plans, performance reviews, resource utilization reports. So who has got this kind of additional time, potentially who is massively over allocated already. Stakeholder input, so collect input from key stakeholders. That might include people like kind of team leaders, department heads, employees, potentially also kind of stakeholders. Would be residents or tenants as well, particularly if you're looking at things like maybe resident engagement roles. Market analysis, so analyze industry's trends and market demands and kind of anticipate future needs. So again, where is the market, where is kind of a policy and process and kind of the external pressures in terms of retrofit, and can we get ahead of that and start getting those skills in place in a kind of just-in-time manner. Competitor analysis. I mean, probably not, competitors are probably not the word in social housing or within local government, but kind of peer analysis. There'll be people doing really good work just across the the road from you, potentially in a peer organization. So study those peers. Ideally, can you get in front of them? Can you have a chat with them to understand their structures, their roles? How are they delivering? There's certainly no need to reinvent the wheel within each individual organization if some really good work that you can pull on from other people. And normally people are very willing to share that as well. So brainstorming sessions. So, you've gathered that information from all these different areas. Now you can sit down with your team, assemble a diverse team ideally, so include members from various departments, levels within the organization. It's always interesting the different aspects you get when you've pulled a kind of interdepartmental team together. So you might have someone from accounts, you might have a senior leadership person, you might have a surveyor, someone from maybe a planned works team. Once they get together, actually the different aspects that they'll pull together is really interesting. So facilitate discussion, use a facilitator to guide the brainstorming sessions. If I can say the word facilitation is a real skill sometimes, particularly when you're trying to pull different voices together, where you might have someone who's more outspoken and actually trying to pull from some of the people who are potentially less outspoken. And their ideas as well. Idea generation, encourage open creative thinking to generate a comprehensive list of tasks and roles, and prioritization as well. So rank identified tasks and roles based on their importance and urgency. So what do we really need to do now? What is not so important and actually we can do in a month's time, etc. Step 3 would be to define job descriptions and role requirements. So this doesn't necessarily have to be, reorganizing someone's actual job description, which might then have to go through HR. But if you've got something similar to an operations manual that you're putting together as the kind of key point of information on delivering a project, what are those roles and what who's named against those? So write clear, detailed job description outlining responsibilities and expectations for kind of each role within the project. Required skills and qualifications against those roles, so specify the skills, qualifications and experience for each one. And again, that will help you in that gap analysis area. And then alignment with goals. So ensure that each role aligns with the organization's strategic goals and objectives. So again, that you're not kind of falling foul of running away with a project that actually doesn't fall in line with the goals of the organization as a whole. How do I work out which jobs need to be done and which roles must be filled? Lots of sources of information there. So, internal processes, procedures, experience, then looking at the PAS 2035 standard. Obviously that is your guiding light in terms of delivering retrofit. And so really making sure you've got those roles really baked in, you've got that understanding from a client side, and you've got that experience, whether that be from internal or external. And guidance from consortiums and supply chain partners. So particularly if you are delivering your retrofit in a consortium, making sure you are kind of utilizing information there, that everyone, again, is on the same page in terms of how you're delivering that. Are you looking at joint procurement? Are you looking at some form of joint delivery potentially, and how would that work? And again, you've also got the RISE website there. Lots and lots of information that we certainly wouldn't have time to go into today in terms of procurement, retrofit, delivery, resident engagement. If you've got any kind of areas that you're not unsure of, we talk about that kind of quick upskilling sometimes. Just spending some time on the RISE website and going through some of those masterclasses would be really helpful. And we've talked about this mapping, but it doesn't need to be massively complex. In fact, the simpler sometimes the better. It could just be literally an Excel table with the job role and name against it. So list all the jobs, tasks, roles, and see if you can put a name against each one. Do they have the right skills and capabilities and capacity? Think about then the gap. So you list that role. There is someone who is able to hand over solar PV, and there's no one named against it because we don't have anyone with that kind of understanding or capability, right? At least now we know the gap and we can fill that. Bridging gaps, as we said before, so you could have kind of that in-house availability. You've already got the skills, fantastic. In-house training, so we've got the people, but actually we just need to upskill in kind of X, Y, and Z area. In fact, no, we don't have any of those skills, all the people we need to recruit, or we need to outsource, and it'll be up to you in terms of what's most appropriate, whether that recruiting or outsourcing or just training. It's very kind of project and organization dependent on what fits best. Managing the team and keeping alignment. So you've got the team now, everyone's skilled up, you've got all the teams, everyone knows what they're doing. Now we're away, we're delivering our retrofit project. How do we manage the team? How do we keep all the plates spinning through the project? And I'm sure most of you are aware, in any retrofit project, there's lots of plates to spin. So how can we head off problems, and what can we do when they arise? So clear goals and milestones, task delegation, and regular check-ins. So again, making sure your team know what they're doing and when they're supposed to do it, and you potentially as a project manager or as someone who overseeing a project knows that where they can delegate those tasks to and who has the right skills. Also, then either you can have regular check-ins with your team, and your team can regularly check in either with the team as a whole or yourself in terms of areas they're unsure of. Some of that regular check-in and kind of task delegation will be done via these tools we're going to talk about. But yeah, making sure there is that process in place. Communication, open communication channels, as we've already talked about, potentially some collaboration tools and feedback loop. So you're never going to get everything right from day one. There'll always be things you didn't think about that have come up and are now problems that need to be solved. So making sure that you haven't just produced a load of documents that then sit on a shelf and never kind of referred to ever again. They should be, I hate the word, but maybe living and breathing documents that you're constantly updating, so that actually everything is up to date, and if someone needs to check something, the documents make sense. And then risk management, so contingency planning, regular monitoring. What are we going to do if X person leaves? Do we have plans in place in terms of, right, okay, these are skills we would look to kind of train up or hire, etc. So regular monitoring against those particular risks in terms of delivering the project, particularly if you've got kind of single points of failure. That could be a real problem. One person, his job is to do all of the social housing local grant reporting. That person leaves, there's no kind of understanding of the processes within kind of the wider team, what that person used to do, and actually projects can start to fall apart very quickly if that single point of failure has kind of left the business. So how do we manage those risks? How do we stop everyone firing off in different directions, which can, it's very easy to happen, particularly if you've got multiple departments working on a project, and can often be siloed or have maybe slightly different objectives. So again, setting those clear objectives. I'm sure you've all come across SMART objectives before, but ideally, any objectives you set are going to be specific, they're going to be measurable, they're going to be achievable, and they're going to be time-bound, relevant and time-bound. That makes sure you're able to judge against, are people actually achieving their objectives or not? Communicate goals and kind of regular updates. Again, we're just talking about making sure that that's properly communicated. No point setting SMART objectives if no one ever checks on them. People will eventually figure that out and think, well, there's no point me updating my SMART objectives because no one is looking at it. And again, it becomes a problem when something goes wrong. Then you say, oh, let's have a look at those objectives. Where are we up to? How come we've not done this? So making sure that's kind of regularly updated. Collaboration tools or collaborative tools. So there's lots of project management software out there. Sometimes actually just an Excel spreadsheet is also just as good in terms of everyone having sight of those particular goals, where we're up to. Has something moved to the right potentially? Have we completed a piece of work actually before we were supposed to, which is fantastic. Shared documents. So do you have some form of SharePoint or area in which everyone can access documents, so we can see, oh yeah, that handover document was signed and it was submitted there. Even though that person's on holiday, we can now access that. We can see that, oh, there was a couple of snags that were then re-raised to the contractor, and the contractor should have done that. And so we'll make sure we're on top of that. Again, task assignments. This piece of work was due to be done. We due to make sure that, I don't know, there was an electrical check, etc. It was named against this person. Has it been done by this date? If not, why not? There will be times where something has had to move for valid reasons, but making sure your people know what they're supposed to be doing, giving people relevant and achievable tasks. And leadership. So strong leadership obviously always is helpful in terms of guiding a project forward, providing that mentoring and support, and also conflict resolution, particularly if you're delivering across kind of multiple different teams and departments. There'll always be areas of friction. There'll always be areas where someone's demands is or feels that they need to be spending more time on X, and you feel they should be more time on Y, and you have different maybe line management. Then who is going to provide that overarching conflict resolution if something were to go awry slightly? So beware of hidden assumptions. It's always easy, particularly when you're kind of in the midst of delivering a project, to assume everyone else knows X, Y, or Z. So identify those hidden assumptions. So question everything. Again, that's where that brainstorming session comes in, or where those regular check-ins come in, making sure you're questioning, not just assuming, because it's really easy to assume something is happening because you thought it would be evident for someone, but that's not always the case. Critical thinking, and again, those diverse perspectives, particularly into team kind of disciplines. Someone from accounts is going to have a different perspective on, I don't know, the invoicing structure and how something should work than maybe someone from the delivery side. So again, making sure that everyone's on the same page, and again, the contractors as well may have different opinions. Impact of hidden assumptions. So assuming that we haven't done some of this work already, and we've got potentially some hidden assumptions there, that can lead to misaligned goals, ineffective strategies, and resource misallocation. So assuming that, let's say, someone assumed that they were already due to do 50% of handovers, but you were assuming that everyone was doing 100% of handovers. That can lead to resource misallocation. So actually someone gets pulled onto another project, and then you come back and say, well, how come we're getting some of these snags coming through from a tenant, let's say, do you not do handover in that? They said, no, I was only doing 50%. But I'm also now on another project Again, just making sure that everyone is kind of fully knows what they should be doing when they should be doing it, and address the hidden assumptions. So regular reviews, open communication and scenario planning, and those feedback mechanisms. So making sure, we weren't really clear in our job description that they were supposed to do 100% of handovers. Therefore, let's go back into that ops manual or back into that JD, and we'll amend that. And actually, now this actually shows us that we don't have enough resource, and maybe you need to pull from somewhere else or get additional resource in order to help us deliver that. Or we change our assumption and say, actually, we're happy that the contractor is delivering. We'll have maybe some escalation processes if we start to get lots of snagging, that we'll move back up to 100%, but we're happy to step down to, I don't know, 70% of physical on-site handover, etc. So yeah, there's ways and means of making sure you've got that open communication and that feedback, so that those documents, again, remain up to date. So communication is critical. Feel like, it's almost repeating yourself, but it's really everything falls down on communication. You need to keep everyone and everything informed and aligned. There's potential issues with cultural sensitivity sometimes, making sure someone's got really clear instructions. Again, as we said, those job descriptions, those role descriptions, those gap analysis that we've done as a team. Everyone is really clear in terms of what they should be doing. You've got those regular check-ins. You've got that ability for the team to communicate freely between each other. Conflict resolution, we've got potentially a kind of an SLT buy-in who's got the kind of overarching project oversight, who can provide additional conflict resolution should there be some potential misunderstanding, miscommunication between teams or departments, and those feedback mechanisms, as we said, to make sure that actually we've identified this issue, we've now rectified it, and it won't happen again because there is this X, Y, and Z in place. On to some useful tools now that should hopefully make life easier when you're starting to think about this and deliver this. Risk register, great. It's for summarizing tool really for kind of project status. So your governance procedures and any formal agreements and consortium agreements should fall within this kind of risk register. Ideally, you don't need it if everything's going well, but when things go wrong, then it comes into its own. So really, again, it's not something that should sit on the shelf. As those risks occur, and they will occur, you can continue to update a risk register. What was I going to say there? Yeah, making sure that it's updated, and that when you need it, it's there. There are templates available. You probably have had to done them in terms of like MMRs and stuff like that, and they're also available for social housing fund. If you've never done a risk register before, there will be those templates to get you started, so you don't have to start from scratch. RACI chart, I'm not sure whether you may have heard of this before, but it stands for responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed. So what do we mean by that? So who's responsible for delivering any particular task? That could generally be a small team, a small number of people who are delivering that piece of work. Let's say it's a number of surveyors who are doing handovers, to stick with the kind of example I've been using. Accountable, who's the one person who's then accountable for that task? So it may be the direct line manager of the surveyors, who's making sure that they've delivered their 75% of handovers, let's say. Consulted, so who are the people who've been consulted? So that could be any number of people. So that might be some wider plan maintenance teams, that might be contractors, that might be tenants, etc. And informed, again, any number of people, probably a wider number of people who've been informed. That would probably be kind of reported back up through normal reporting channels. Also kind of maybe tenants groups, residents groups, etc. Informed of this is the process that we're doing, so everyone knows that what's happening with it, with any particular action. And again, as some of these ones before, it doesn't have to be overly special. It can look something like this. So you can map out the tasks, and people in simple kind of graphic or spreadsheet. Don't need to create anything all singing, all dancing. In reality, something like this will more than suffice. So you'd be amazed how often in a project different people think they're accountable, or no one has been picked as responsible for one particular topic, particularly for key activities where you have, and this will help for identify key activities where you haven't figured out how they will be delivered. So listing those tasks at the top, who's responsible for delivering it, who's over who has overarching accountability for that particular task, and then who have we consulted, who have we informed. At that point, something comes up later down the line, someone says, oh, I didn't know about this. Well, actually, yes, you were consulted about it at the very start when we were planning this task. You didn't raise an issue back then. It just helps smooth things over sometimes. It's surprising how often people with their, will be delivering projects with their heads down, forget to consult with people who might be directly affected by what they're working on, or don't inform people that a change has been made to a task. A good example maybe would be, you're delivering a retrofit, you've drawn down loads of funding to do lots of PV. You're going ahead, you're installing PV on a lot of roofs. This may be particularly useful from a kind of social housing perspective. But actually the planned maintenance team next year are due to put new roofs on a load of the properties you've just installed PV on. Not an ideal situation, because they're going to come down again next year. You're going to have to take off those solar panels. Might affect the warranty. It's going to cause you issues and additional costs in terms of taking those off, storing them and putting them back on. And that's certainly something that I've come across before. And there'll be many other things that come across, whereas actually we've got the task, which is installing solar panels, and actually consulted could have been the planned maintenance team or the kind of the asset data team, who could have informed us up front that this would have been a problem. Yeah, the RACI chart makes it much easier to map out who is doing what and keep everyone up to speed. Elevator pitch, a good one really for obviously team leaders, but actually everyone in terms of their role should be able to tell you what their role is in a very short elevator pitch. We've all kind of heard the story of, you've got a great idea, you meet the CEO in an elevator and you have 20 seconds between the floors in the elevator or the lift to make your case for this particular business, let's say. But you're not covering all the detail, but just to interest people, get the chance. You get the chance then to kind of go into detail later, but grab the attention. So marketing companies obviously like to use this kind of thing in terms of, there's an acronym called ADA, which is attention, interest, desire, and action. So it's kind of like a marketing and advertising framework that outlines the stages a customer goes through before making a purchase. And obviously, you're not probably in the position where you're selling a service necessarily, but you potentially do need to sell a project or a kind of particular role to get people's buy-in. So this goes through kind of an introduction, problem statement, benefit, and solution. And it applies to all teams, functions, suppliers you need for a project. You'd be amazed at the number of times, I've listened to people with a strong idea, spend all their time giving the kind of context and history and never get into kind of what the idea actually is. So, and if we go back to, let's say, you've realized that you need X resource, and you're trying to get that resource from a member of the SLT who's particularly busy, how are you going to make sure you get that across in a very succinct and concise way? So think about why, as from a kind of audience point of view, why am I listening to this? What problem is this going to solve for me? And do I care? So why should they care about any particular problem? Many people find that this type of thinking maybe a little bit cynical. But then the project should sell itself, and I don't need to sell. I'm not a salesman. I work in social housing. I work in local authorities. I'm a qualified expert. Just listen to me, please. And sometimes that will work, but people are human. There are many people you need to bring on board, keep on board in a project. And how are you going to do that? Making sure everyone has maybe that elevator pitch for their role, and ideally you as maybe someone who's trying to fill gaps and deliver a project really understands why should anyone care about this project, and how am I going to get across that in a really concise way. Boundary objects. Again, this might be something that you've not come across before, but it's an interesting tool. This tool addresses the problem of siloed working. I'm sure, if you've worked in social housing or within local authorities, you'll be keenly aware of potential siloed working between departments. So I'm sure you recognise that problem. So teams are following kind of their own priorities. as an example, again, maybe focusing on social housing point of view, but say you've got a voids team, they've got particular requirements to have certain turnaround time of a void property, and you're in trying to deliver retrofit, and actually it'd be perfect time to fit an air source heat pump, but it doesn't work. You can't get it in the time that the voids team want to, and therefore you lose opportunities to air source heat pump in a really timely, and the best time to do it would have been at void stage, but you've missed that because of different priorities. So teams following their own priorities, information does not flow, suspicion, there's, that's not our process, that's not our problem kind of thinking. So yeah, communicating by tying notes to a brick and you're throwing it over a wall, into the other silo, trying to get noticed, but probably only either having someone with a nice big bat hitting it back across that wall across you, because it's not their problem necessarily. So one of the solutions is something called a boundary object. So something that sits between different groups, likely kind of different departmental groups, and helps maybe send some neutral communication. So it can be a mathematical model, a shared project plan. Probably in this case, it would be a shared project plan, a roadmap, a kind of a process map of all things associated with the project or particular task. So where it comes into its own is that it must be co-invented. So it's not something that you, as the person who's delivering this retrofit project, comes up with and places on the other teams. It's co-invented by those teams. So all relevant groups must be involved, and a boundary object cannot be created by one team and then kind of passed to another. So that triggers kind of misunderstanding, the kind of not invented here kind of thinking. If it goes to be, if it's going to be collectively owned, it should be created on kind of neutral territory. Again, not you coming in and saying this is how it's going to work, making sure that it's neutral and everyone has input. If one group hosts the work, subtly and progressively becomes theirs, and then people can start feeling you're just telling us what to do and we have different priorities. So find a workspace outside, that everyone can feel that you're on neutral ground. Choose objects that are persistent boundary objects, so things that are always causing you issues, need regular I can say the word again, need regular use. They should be poked and prodded, revised, and amended as needed. So then again, all of these things will change through time, but making sure you've identified those key areas of those key hurdles that always cause you problems. So someone's got their own KPIs that don't match up with this deliverable. How can we meet in the middle somewhere? Make sure they have real meaning to all the participating groups. So something that's only important to one team is still important, but it's not a boundary object. So it needs to cover both teams in terms of priorities. I've seen the creation of kind of shared boundary objects take partners kind of at loggerheads, frozen in mutual suspicion and sabotage, and then suddenly a light switches on and they kind of allows them to kind of make swift progress. So actually, I understand why we're trying to do this now. What we can do is we can take this void and we put it into a long-term void because it meets X, Y, and Z, and then we can go ahead and install an air source heat pump, and then the tenant moves in, no further work, everyone's happy, fantastic. So just to wrap up, make sure you cover the important stuff kind of right at the beginning of any conversation or presentation. Surprising how often people with their kind of heads down delivering forget to consult with people who will be directly affected and what they are working on, or don't inform people that a change has been made and a task's been delivered. So things will often get missed if you haven't got that real connected communication chain. The RACI chart makes it much easier to map out who's going to be doing what and keep everyone up to speed. So again, if you're doing that gap analysis, if you're doing those bridging the gaps, using that RACI chart is a really helpful method. Beware of those hidden assumptions. Don't assume anything. Ideally, use a risk register to monitor a project and update it as often as required. Make sure people in the team have that elevator pitch, and particularly you, if you're trying to kind of bridge those skills gaps. How are you going to sell that ideally? The RACI chart and boundary objects should keep people aligned, and then governance agreements for serious problems. So what's that escalation route, and how are you going to deal, particularly those interdepartmental issues that maybe you're unable to solve. So that's been a kind of a whistle stop. As I said, those are some of the kind of rise on demand resources that you can access. Thank you very much for listening to this Rise Retrofit Masterclass on resource planning and team upskilling.